वेलकम टू आवर नेशन स्टेट डायलॉग सीरीज राष्ट्र राज्य संवाद श्रृंखला में आपका स्वागत है. 欢迎收看民族国家对话系列. I'm Dr. Geeta Kochur, moderator for today's discussion. Today it is our pleasure to have with us Professor Wang Yong. And Professor Yong is Deputy Dean of the Institute of New Structural Economics at Peking University. And before joining Peking University, he worked at the Department of Economics at Hong Kong University of Science and Technology and the World Bank. Professor Yong obtained his Ph.D. in economics from the University of Chicago. His main research fields are economic growth, macro development, China and India's economy, and new structural economics. He has published 8 books and many research papers, including Thoughts and Debates on New Structural Economics, which was published by Peking University Press. Professor Yong serves as a Secretary General of the New Structural Economic Research Alliance, consultant of the World Bank, a research associate of Federal Reserve Bank of the United States, and Vice Chairperson of China's Development Economics Association. So welcome, Professor Wang, to our channel.
Thank you, Geeta.
Let's begin with very broad issue that is the talk of the town, actually, and that is about China's economic success, which everyone knows China has surpassed in the US in economic growth. However, there are these trade tensions or the trade war that we have been talking about between US and China for the past few years, right? And which is why I think this is one of the main concerns of the people around. So how do you see this tariff war with the US, and what are the future challenges and possibilities that you look from Chinese perspective? Yeah.
Okay, thank you. I think this is a very important question. Starting from year 2018, President Donald Trump launched the trade war against China, and then China is kind of faced a serious kind of the issue, the problem, the trade war. Now looking back, I think we have to think about it in a larger context, right? First of all, the trade war is not just between US and China. So we see that, in fact, President Donald Trump imposed quite high tariffs almost on all the US trade partners, including the allies, including those countries that the US has trade surplus with. So first of all, there was certainly some kind of like a Donald Trump issue there. But second, indeed, so now if you look at the China and US trade war, during the first term of Donald Trump, so we see a sequence of dialogue and negotiations on trade. Apparently, Chinese government really wanted to reach a deal, but somehow it was not that successful. And then, but I think in the first term, essentially, kind of China adopt a sort of like a soft attitude and really try to kind of try its best to reach the trade negotiation, but it didn't work. Now, during the second term of Donald Trump, I think China changed its strategy. And I think, just playing soft would not help. So it's more or less kind of tit for tat thing. So if U.S. imposed a tariff war and China kind of counter it. But the purpose still try to reach the negotiations. So it things become more complicated. But I think, it is not just, if we just think about U.S.-China, it's not just a trade imbalance issue. It's much more than that. We know that, so China is now the second largest economy in the world in terms of total GDP, and the U.S. is still the top country. So we all heard the term Thucydides trap. There is a tension between the first and the largest economy, and in fact, it's not just about the trade tension. And from China's side, we see in the past decade, the past 8 years, China also suffered like technology containment policy from the U.S., so-called small yard, high fence. So it's a U.S. government sort out a very precise kind of industry or technology and adopt that technical containment policy. So and because of this, China's government has to play kind of some kind of a cautious way. So because for the high-end chips, China want to buy, but cannot buy it. So China is somehow is compelled to do the import substitution. Not China choose to, but have to, because if we all know that in today's world, computer chips is super important, and for AI, for everything. If you so that your high-end chips is cut off, then the whole industry related to AI or high technology just paralyzed. So in that sense, China's government has no choice but to do import substitution, and I think this has a profound impact on China's whole policy making. It is not. So it makes China government say, okay, maybe for some products right now China can still import, but what happened if someday those kind of things will no longer be supplied to China? So and foreseeing that China is kind of having more and more on self-sufficiency. I think it is not like something like very happy to do. China happy to do. This is kind of like very cautious. So I think this also has a kind of deep effect on China's policy making. We know this year is the starting year of the 15th five-year plan, and I think so. In the past 10 years, especially the past 5 years, China's top leaders always highlight so-called balanced development and security. So, well, if you highlight security, then sometimes it really violates the principle of economics. So that you do no longer kind of develop purely based on your comparative strategy. You have to think about what happens if extreme things happen. So if what happened, so and I think this is bad. I do think it's bad. I think looking for the whole world suffer from trade tension, trade wars, and we know that when it is not just a bilateral economic relation. Right? Now today we are in a world of globalization, and a supply chain everywhere. It affects almost all the countries. So I don't think it is a healthy. The world is now at a healthy in a healthy situation. I think the best security is only ensured by stable trade globalization. So everyone can buy something. It does not have comparative advantage, and supply the things it has comparative advantage. So that's beneficial to all the countries. This is Econ 101. But now, since there are a lot of kind of geopolitical dynamics out there, and some other things make sense too complicated, and every country suffer from that. And I think the U.S.-China trade tariffs. So the U.S. imposed quite high tariff on China, but many economic analysis shows, economic analysis conducted by the leading trade economists in the United States show that actually most of the burden were shouldered by U.S. consumers, and this is also bad for Chinese suppliers. So and from Chinese side, a lot of the goods that used to be just produced aiming to export outside, now suddenly can no longer export outside, then necessarily going to intensify domestic competition. So that really hurts Chinese firms, and also increase unemployment rate in China. So and create so-called overcapacity. But I don't think it is the world is in a status of overcapacity. It's just for China's domestic market that the supply far exceeds the domestic demand. So I think it has a serious consequence. So I don't think that countries, especially like developing countries like India and China, want to see this kind of unstable trade environment. I seriously hope that a more stable global trading system can be kind of enforced. Now I think the WTO basically collapsed. It cannot do anything. And now we are not in a healthy sort of a status of economic globalization. So looking forward, I really hope that countries, especially large countries like India and China, we should and let our voice be heard. Like we represent like 85% of the total population on this planet, which stand for like developing countries. Developed countries only account for 15%. And we really need the trade. We need take advantage of our abundant labor and export of labor-intensive goods and so on and so forth. And we need the high-tech products from developed countries. I think it is mutually beneficial. So
No, I
it
mean,
is a yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
yeah. No, I mean, you're right in the sense that I think US is not so very pro about globalization now, and it's like the Chinese want, and there's a whole narrative about, China has taken a lot of advantage of the globalization, but because it is pushing so much of exports, the other countries are having, a trade deficit sort of environment, which is very not conducive for maybe US or other countries, which is where I think this whole issue of trade tariff is coming. But you made one point very interesting out here, and I would want to take you there in terms of if there is this global issue of trade tariff and everything, China's export also suffers. But what we have been seeing for the past few years, I mean, of course, Corona was one time where everything was shut down and exports went down. Especially in China, we see a new revival in terms of, China is now showing an export surplus of US dollar 1.2 billion, for the first time, like after this Corona thing, despite whatever the slowdown that happened, domestically. So how do you assess and reconcile this, particularly when both employment situation and internal consumption is reportedly falling in China? And you have mentioned about the unemployment rate, which is going to be affected. It is affected during Corona as well. And I mean, of course, employment situation is also very critical. So can you just, give me an assessment of that particularly? Yeah.
Sure. So if we think about China, its GDP growth rate in 2025 is 5%. In 2024, it's also 5%. So yeah, but in the in 2010, even after global financial crisis in 2010, 11, 12, it's still over 10%. So in the past like 15 years, 15, 20 years, we see China's growth rate gradually decline over time. At the same time, if you look at like China's net export as a percentage of GDP, it was not that high. So it was quite high around 2008 and 2009. So China also had quite large trade surplus with the US, and the US complained. And then after that, you see actually the net export as a percent of GDP in China gradually decline almost close to zero. So it is not like China always maintain very high export GDP ratio to the world. No, that's not the case. But the last year, 2025, is a little bit.
Sure. Can I just interrupt you to tell me if you know the figures of when it was highest, what was the rate, and when it is lowest, what is the rate? Yeah. Lowest, you said it went down to 0%. Yeah.
It is, I believe that, it's at least before COVID-19, if I remember correctly. So maybe 2017, 18, or 19, I think the net export GDP ratio is very small. 1% or lower than 1% or 1-2%. It's not really big. So it's really like, so I'll come back now. Because we do see quite high number the trade imbalance between China and the US, and in fact also China export a lot to the other part of the world, making like and we see the media cover this and giving people an impression that China kind of mainly rely on export. That is just a fallacy. That's not true. If you look at the number, look at the structure, so it's still the domestic share, domestic consumption, domestic investment, plus government expenditure plus net export. That is GDP, right? So net export as a percent of GDP is not that high. But last year, let me Last year, 2025, though, the export GDP ratio is a little bit higher than before. I think this is a little bit unexpected for me, at least. I think, because of this is also related to the trade war we just mentioned. Sometimes when people expect to see higher tariff in the future, they would trade more right now, because they think now it is a better time to trade. So it's kind of abnormal. It's kind of abnormal. And indeed, a lot of people discuss, the consumption GDP ratio in China may be low, and so that is equivalent to saying, well, the external fraction of China GDP is high, but I think, starting from 2024, the last quarter of 2024, China's government suddenly realized, okay, so the 5% GDP target might not be fulfilled. So China's government tried all it could. In my view, they tried everything it could to boost the consumption. They subsidized the consumption of durable goods, etc. And try to really boost the consumption. And even today, last year or in the near future, China, make it very explicit. They want to raise the consumption GDP ratio, want to boost the consumption. I think this is not something that China's government is unwilling to do, but just how to do it more effectively. But you cannot always subsidize durable goods. So this is this is not gonna work. So the more comprehensive structural reforms are needed to increase consumption. But still, I think that the most important effective way to increase consumption is to stabilize your income increase expectation. Only when your income increase, households want to spend money if they have money. So you do not really need any stimulation for to boost consumption. So to increase income is the most important thing. And then the question is how to increase income, and how to boost the GDP. So China's government, I think, including scholars, all understand China cannot just rely on export, and as China's domestic market size is increasing, we all know that the domestic market is gonna play an increasingly important role. This is also explicit in China's government official files. They call it dual circulation. They say the internal circulation and external circulation, and the internal circulation gonna account for a larger share. This is just a law in economics. A larger the economy, the larger domestic share, just like the U.S. and so forth. And China's government perfectly understand this. So now I think now so this. And another thing, let me add, is that because of the trade tension between U.S. China, and so China can no longer sell that much goods to the U.S. So China also want to diversify its exported portfolio. So in fact, China, I think China's the U.S. used to account for 19% of China's export. I think it's 2019. Now, I think it's down to 11% or so. So and China export more to Southeast Asia, to Europe, and also to other developing countries like Africa. So the trade kind of spread to other regions. And I think it's, to some extent, it is good in the sense, okay, China need to collaborate more with other regions, especially other developing countries, and also China want to import. For example, China just announced that for all the 53, if I remember correctly, 53 African countries that have diplomatic relation with China impose zero tariff from all for all the products that imported from all the 53 African countries. So China made that policy, and clearly also China government, organized this import exhibition, so annual event, try to kind of import more and so on and so forth. So I do think the Chinese government is trying to ameliorate this situation. But it is not a kind of easy thing. It needs to take some time.
No, you mentioned two things in between. One, you were talking about the 15 5-year plan. Can you give us a brief, thing about what would be the focus of this 15 5-year plan, which is going to start? I mean, this is the first year we know. And second thing that you mentioned in between is about the structural reforms that are very essential for China to do. So are there any plans of the structural reforms, and what are the focus areas of that structural reforms that you're mentioning?
So if you think about the buzzword for the policy analysis in China, it is so-called high new quality product forces, 新质生产力. So that is that basically China's need to highlight this high-tech thing and want to increase the TFP of productivity instead of just maintain a high GDP growth number. So highlight more on quality. But behind it, so I think the structural reforms are crucial. And I think one structural reform is to build the unified domestic market for production factors, especially for production factors like labor. China has a hukou system. The hukou system is still there, so there's kind of a barrier for migration, and so this should be improved, and also in capital allocation. So capital allocation should be improved, and third, also the land market and how to do the land market. That is also an important issue, because in coastal areas, land is very expensive. But in interior region, land is not as expensive. But because of some policy, restrictions, so in some part of China, they even pour all the earth into the sea, and they create land. It's very, very expensive. But on the other hand, the many land in interior region are sit there idle. So clearly, it is not most efficient way to utilize land. So all these kind of unified domestic market reform, that's something Chinese government plans to do. I think it is the right direction. So this is the first thing. And the second, I mentioned the capital market allocation. I think China really, really needs financial reforms. Right now, China's financial system is dominated by banking. So stock market and insurance, these accounts are very small share. I think the banking thing, the banks have this comparative advantage in boost the investment for those mature technologies. If we do infrastructures, then banks has the advantage. But as China is approaching to the world technology frontier, at least for some industries, then China can only make technological progress by its own innovation and invention, and that is highly uncertain. So for that kind of innovation type of activities, what is more efficient is like stock market, like Nasdaq, instead of banking. So you need to use this equity investment to incentivize the innovators to do the innovation. So I think now China really need to kind of improve its stock market. China's stock market was not functioning well in the past. And although in the absolute number is quite high, but as a fraction of China's whole financial system, it's very tiny, very small. But clearly, China now needs a more effective stock market. It needs a Chinese version of the Nasdaq. It needs more effective PE and VC to help the industry upgrading. So I think this is something China has to do. And also I think this is also related to how to boost China's domestic consumption. So in the past 10 years, China has very tough policy on real estate. So China's real estate market was not like what it looked like 10 years ago. So the housing prices are going down or keep flat. Housing is no longer number one sort of option for investment. So now consider household. So where to invest is income, right? So I think if the stock market is working well, that will bring more wealth to households, and which in turn gonna boost their consumption, private consumption. And now the interest rate in bank is extremely low. I think the China government purposefully want to even lower the interest rate. So deposit rate is low. So household needs to find a better way to increase the family wealth. So I think stock market is the key. So this is the second sort of financial reform. I think this is crucial. The third structural reform is fiscal reform. At least I think that there are two dimensions out there. One is how to increase the revenue share of local government, because in the past, the provincial government or city government, their revenue mainly rely on the land revenue, which increased dramatically when the real estate market is very dynamic. And now the real estate market is not that good, so which means that the local government really short of revenues, and that creates some problems, local government debt issues and so forth. So I think that China's fiscal system need to be reformed so that the local government can have a higher budget, a higher revenue. And the second thing that China needs to reform is to kind of create a more consumption friendly toward the system. Right now, the tax is mainly from the supply side. So that is, which means that China's local government, their taxes or central government, their taxes mainly come from the firms. They collect the taxes mainly from firms, not from consumers. They do not impose consumption tax. So, which means the local government, from a local government perspective, they are the implementer of the policies. So they want to increase the tax revenue. And so they would have very strong incentive to encourage investment, to encourage firms to come in and investment. But now China need to boost the consumption. So if China can change the kind of tax system so that the consumption tax would account for a larger share, then from tax collection perspective, the local government would have high incentive to do what it could to increase consumption. And I think if China could reform in that direction, that also help the labor market kind of unification, because now so when the consumption tax become more important, then you can imagine local government would welcome more people to come to my city to consume. So the other so this is a fiscal reform. I think it is also very crucial. And the last but not least, I think China really need to improve a more kind of innovation friendly or entrepreneurship friendly sort of business environment. So rule of law is very important. You need to really stabilize people's expectation, especially for private-owned enterprises and the entrepreneurs. You need to give them the confidence, a stable confident belief. Okay, so we are can do business in a very safe, very stable, and environment. Otherwise, China is a socialist economy, and some entrepreneurs they are worried about the policy uncertainty. So that's gonna hurt the incentive to invest domestically. So I think that by having the to improve the rule of law in China, to especially give private entrepreneurs more confidence about what they're doing, and also create the whole business environment that are more friendly toward the private entrepreneurship. I think this China should also improve in that direction. And these are the things I think are important. And I'm very glad to see that in the 15th five-year plan, some form of they called suggestions, but they are already there. We see the 15th five-year plan, and I think that the whole plan is indeed moving to that direction. I think overall, I applaud that direction. But of course, the question is how to really implement it, make it true. So this is my view.
So you mentioned something about the new technologies that we are looking at, especially when China is moving towards these new technologies. I would want to push you to that area in terms of we all know that China is increasing on new technologies and high technology based industries that could actually shrink the number of jobs, right? Is this going to create some social imbalance? Because in India also we are facing the same situation due to lack of jobs in semi-civil sectors where mass employment can be provided. So how do you think that China is going to reconcile this kind of an imbalance that might happen? Or do you think China would not be facing these kind of major issues? Yeah.
Well, I think this is a very important question. But if you take China as a whole, because due to the quite high economic growth in the past 45 years, China's labor cost actually is also quite high compared to, say, 40 years ago. I remember in the year 1978 when China just started market-oriented reforms. At that year, China's GDP per capita was less than 1/3 of that in Sub-Sahara region. So it was really China, really the poorest country, one of the poorest country in the world. And now the labor costs rose very rapidly, especially in coastal areas. So China overall, so in general, it's losing its comparative advantage in labor-intensive industries like apparel, shoes, and so on and so forth. And because the labor cost is rising, and so the cost of capital, relative cost of capital is actually climbing. So China need to move to more capital-intensive industries. This is a must. This is not, and China has to do that. This is the first thing I want to add. And the second, now, if you think about those high technology, I think the high technology could be also divided into two parts. One is really, people now talking about AI, automation, and it really kind of replace a lot of jobs, especially those routine jobs. And now the AI developed really, really fast, and even some some occupation with high human capital now can be easily replaced by AI. That is indeed, they were alarming. Many colleagues in the economic profession, they are studying this, especially the labor market effect. But overall, if you look at the history, in humankind, we have machines, electricity, all those major technology breakthroughs. And that period, people also worried. Some jobs are taken away by machines. So now, will this time be different? I don't know. But I think for those AI automation, this is the one thing. But I just my conjecture or my belief is that we will find a way, because the history is going to tell us that this labor-saving technology actually can also create some jobs, and the job creation speed is actually higher than the job destruction speed. Because but this is a kind of belief. We do not know what going to happen. But this is I don't think we should stop or reverse the AI-led sort of a technology direction. This is the technology nobody could stop. But the question is how to adapt ourselves to a world of AI, right? And it really needs serious thinking and so on and so forth. But for China, there's also another part of the high tech, which is a capital intensive technologies. So it does not have to be AI, but it is more capital intensive. I think China need to move it in that direction. And now China's population started to decline, and also I would say China made quite a large progress in human capital investment in the past 40 years. So I think economic theory tells us that capital complements high-skilled worker, but capital replaces, substitute unskilled worker. So if more people that comes to the labor market are equipped with higher human capital, they're going to benefit from the direction to more capital intensive industries. So this is also what's happening. And the third, in China, and it's not every region is like Shanghai, right? So in the coastal areas are quite developed, but we also have less developed Western regions. So for those regions with lower GDP per capita, those traditional industries may be more capital intensive, but the traditional industries still are the industries that consist with the comparative advantage of those regions. So in those regions, as the endowment structure upgrade, namely capital become relatively more abundant, but not as abundant as Shanghai or Shenzhen. So moving to a higher climb up the technology ladder is still the right direction to go. And although there are there's more high tech compared to the past, and more high tech sort of direction, but those regions are also should move to that capital intensive industry direction. So I think China is a collection of regions with highly heterogeneous stage of development. So different regions has their comparative advantage are different, and I think this is something that we also have to take into account. Just like India, India is a large country, and different regions are at different stage of development. So there is no kind of like a universal sort of a policy. They have to adapt to the local conditions.
But I think in China, one of the things that we kept on hearing for past few years is about this Shiputa Kaifa, Western sector, Western region development, and also about Shanghai being the dragon head, and the Western region being the tail, which needs to be supporting sort of role. So in terms of what you're talking about region, and you've also talked about these land issues, real estate issues, which differs. We do see an entire Western region which is lagging behind the entire Eastern region, So how do you see the growth disparity in China, and what are the points that are China is taking in order to address all of these issues, especially considering how significant they are looking at in terms of the 15th five-year plan? Because India is also, as you rightly pointed out, we also have, but it's not a complete one, entire region. It's like state versus state kind of thing. So we're also looking about these development issues, which really becomes more crucial when we, target high growth, high economic growth and everything. So what is that China is doing in terms of its own, regional issues and imbalances that are there?
Yes, it is certainly a very important issue. So China indeed have the enormous regional disparity, both in terms of level GDP and also in terms of GDP growth rate. Now, in 2025, the national average GDP growth rate was 5%. Okay, and if you look at the 31 provinces in mainland China, the region that has highest GDP growth rate is Tibet, but that region has a lowest GDP level. So and the province that has a second highest GDP growth rate is Gansu, which is also a poor region. So now we indeed see poor regions have higher GDP growth rate than richer regions. So there are some evidence of convergence. And if Guangdong is the richest province in China, in terms of total GDP is number one. But the Guangdong last year, the Guangdong's GDP growth rate is 3.9%. Okay, so we do see some evidence that the richest regions grow more slowly than poor regions. But this is not universally true. This so but in general we do see some convergence. This is also a fact. Now the third, I think from economic development perspective, or from purely theoretical perspective, it is somehow beneficial if there exists some kind of a regional disparity, not too high, but some kind of mild sort of disparity. Why? Because if you think, one thing that people might notice is that China has the most complete industrial base. Because according to the United Nations industry classifications, China covered almost all the industries. But why can China do that? I think partly due to the fact that China exists this regional disparity. So, for example, in the richest region of Shanghai, Shenzhen, right? So some of the industry there, they're losing comparative advantage, and then those industries are going to move to the middle part. And then gradually, if those industries also losing comparative in the middle part of China, they're going to moving western to even a poorer region. So that industry always stay within China, although they move across industries. So when there is a certain kind of agreed development step, so that also help the China to keep all the industries. It is beneficial for the whole growth if there exists some kind of a regional inequality, not too high, not too low. And the reason is if there exists some kind of gradual kind of continuum of differentiated stage of development that helps technology diffusion from eastern China and to middle part China and then to western China. But you can do the following thought experiment. If every part of China is at same income level as Shanghai, then if that certain industry is losing comparative advantage in Shanghai, then it has to leave China, right? So it will not help China to keep all the larger industry space. But if, on the other hand, if the regional inequality is too extreme, so now Shanghai is super rich and all the rest of part is as poor as Gansu, then even some industries are losing comparatively in China, it cannot be taken over by the rest of China. So you needed some kind of optimal sort of degree of regional inequality to keep the industry. Why it is important to keep a larger industry space? Because we have input up table. So once you have a more complete industrial space, whenever you do a new innovation, you need to buy some intermediate inputs. Oh, I already have it, so you can easily buy it from anywhere. So it helps innovation. It helps to enlarge production scale and so on and so forth. This is just a theory. But what I want to say is that in China, indeed. So the regional disparity is an important issue, and I think the government now is put it explicitly into the 15th five-year plan to address that issue. They call it regional policies. And you mentioned the 西部大开发, the grand Western movement. So try to kind of ameliorate this polarized sort of regional inequality, and many resources channeled toward the West. But I think, right, so I think market forces are still the most important force. Only when the Western regions have this comparative advantage and can take over those industries from other side, then then those firms are more are more they can really can make money, right? So otherwise, you just the government want to just move industry there if the industries are not consistent with the comparative advantage determined by the endowment structure in the Western regions, then those industries cannot make any profits. So that's why it's important to reform the factor markets. So at least so create so make the poor region more accessible to loans, to all the technologies, and the people can travel more easily. This will help technology diffusion and help human capital reallocation. So for that, I think the infrastructure investment is super important. I think in China, the highway, high-speed trains, and also the 5Gs and so on and so forth. I think these are beneficial for the poor regions. So and at least they have access to all the information about all the business information, and people can move to those poor region now more conveniently. That helps to bring business there. So I think things are improving, but there are a lot need to be done in the future.
So can I just ask you to give me in concrete what are the steps China is taking in terms of structural reform of the entire economic landscape, especially meeting the aspirations and job demands for the masses and increasing the internal consumption of the industry, while also remaining focused on the developing high-tech industries. Like in one sense, summing up what exactly China is doing in terms of this, in terms of the structural reforms here.
Yeah, so as I mentioned earlier, that now, so one thing is how to boost the consumption, right? So to boost the consumption, we need to do two things. The most important thing is to increase the income for everyone, and to increase the income, there are like two dimensions. One is to create more jobs. The second is to help the house finance, and so for both, I think the having to develop a more productive stock market, especially the venture capital market, is very important. It can help both. Okay, it can help help household to direct invest in most productive sort of industries around, and then increase the household wealth, and then that will help increase their private consumption. On the other hand, it will also hopefully could reduce capital misallocation. You could, in a household, could utilize their own private information and invest in the industry that they think it'll be more profitable. I think this is crucial. The financial reform is crucial. I think in the past, the bank dominated system used to work well, but it also has its limitations. China needed to move to a more kind of market oriented financial system that are more favorable to innovation, more favorable to those highly kind of stochastic, unstable, that kind of technology progress. And another thing is, important structural reform is, as I mentioned, the fiscal reform. We need to make the government's incentive right. We need to make the private businessman's incentive right. In China, we all understand that it is super important to give the right incentives to different levels of government, central government and local governments and so forth. And the existing tax system favor investment, because mainly the tax revenue mainly comes from the firms. They collect from firms, not collected from consumers. So that's why the local government want to attract investment instead of thinking hard about how to boost consumption. If the tax system can be reformed such that consumption tax revenue also accounts for important share of total tax revenue for the government, then the government would think harder or more incentivized to increase the consumption, to attract people to come and to consume. I think this is also the tax system need to be reformed. And also I mentioned the labor market, capital market, land market, but let me also add, state-owned enterprises, SOEs, also need to be reformed. I think right now, SOEs, state-owned enterprises, and the private-owned enterprises, they are indeed competing for some resources, and we do see there's some resource misallocation between SOEs and non-SOEs. And I think, in the future, the SOEs need there should be more. We should enhance more complementarity between SOEs and the POEs, private-owned enterprises, and how to deal with the relationship between state-owned enterprises and private-owned enterprises is always a big challenge. So China needs a financial reform, as I mentioned. China needs a more developed stock market. China needs to develop its own version of NASDAQ. China should have a more effective PE and VC and so on and so forth. That is very, very, very crucial. I also highlight importance of fiscal reform and to incentivize the local government officials and also central government officials to do more to increase the consumption, because right now the tax system incentivizes the government officials to just increase investment instead of increase consumption, because the consumption tax revenue is not important right now. We need to make consumption tax more important in the tax system so that the government officials would be incentivized to do more to enhance the consumption. I think this is also very important. And also go ahead.
Yeah, please continue.
I also mentioned that state-owned enterprises also need to be reformed, because how to deal with the relationship between state-owned enterprises and private-owned enterprises is a very important issue in China. And hopefully, private entrepreneurs, private-owned enterprises would feel that, okay, so they are in the same kind of condition as those SOEs, because there's some people argue that state-owned enterprises have favorable access to loans and also enjoy some monopoly power in certain industries, which actually hurt the business of private firms. Then how to kind of create a level field for SOEs and the POEs. This is also an important direction for reform. And the last, And I think if you look at the service sector in China, the social services, namely the services related to human capital, like Medicare, and school, and so this sector also needs to be reformed. In my opinion, we should allow for more private schools. Also, should allow for more private hospitals to increase the supply of high quality teachers and high quality doctors, so that that service sector could be improved. And that not only could tremendously improve the living standards of Chinese people in mainland China, and also would increase more employment, and also likely to boost more consumption, because this is a service sector. So I can go on with a long laundry list of structural reform, but those are what I think are the most important structural reform that China should do in the future.
So let's move a little, to the end of it. I just want to, push you to another aspect of, China's economy, and that's China's increasing interest in South Asia, especially focused, on India. So how China is faring, and what are the challenges for Chinese investments and businesses in South Asia? Your last comments on that.
Okay. So as I mentioned, China is now actually trying to invest in countries beyond the United States, South Asia, and Southeast Asia, and even Africa. So I think India is a very large country, and now it has very fast economic growth. That's great. And I do see there exists a huge room for collaborations between China and India, because from economic side, now the GDP per capita in China is still higher than India. And if you think about the industries, right, some industries that China is losing comparative advantage, but I think for India, it is still consistent with India's comparative advantage. So if these two countries can somehow work out a more feasible plan of collaborations, and I think it will be mutually beneficial. And also, if we think about the economic collaboration between China and Africa, and Africa it is poorer than India. Africa, for example, Ethiopia is the labor cost is about like 10% of China's level, and now we see China Chinese private businessmen reallocate their apparel factories, shoe factory, all the way toward Ethiopia, and in Ethiopia there are industrial parks, and we do see a lot of Chinese entrepreneurs are making money out there, and also that help increase the local employment of their region, and for China. It is also good for China because China's businessmen could still, making money and fully utilize its knowledge about how to produce the product, how to manage production, and their knowledge about the whole, world market. So this FDI I think is beneficial. So if Ethiopia could do that, and India also is closer to China in terms of geographic distance, and also I think India now needs infrastructure, also needs to export, and India has tremendous amount of labor. So I do see large room for China and India to collaborate. And besides that, it's not just about the regional collaborations. I think for the global governance structure, for example, in the international organizations such as the World Bank, IMF, and so on and so forth, and the whole global South need representatives to speak on their behalf. And I do think that India and China, as the two largest developing country, they share their common interests, and also they represent the 85% of the world's population, and they should collaborate more. And that it's not just good for these two countries per se, but also good for the world. And I hope I hope to see more collaborations between China and India.
Yeah, on that very positive note, thank you very much, Professor Yong, for giving us so much of your time. It was really a pleasure talking to you, and I hope these conversations continue, because we have a lot more to learn from you and know more about China. And to the viewers, thank you very much for watching. Please subscribe and like our shows, and you will get some more interesting discussions on this channel. Thank you very much. Namaskar.